Hello and welcome to Nights at the Game Table. We're here at Pat's Games in Austin, Texas. I'm Kevin.
I'm Aryeh.
And today we are going to be talking about what we think is the most important announcement about Guilds of Ravnica.
To keep up to date with everything at Nights at the Game Table, all you have to do is click subscribe and then hit that tiny little notification button next to it, so every time we upload a new video, YouTube will be sure to let you know.
It's going to be the mana bases.
The mana bases.
Yeah, it's been a really long time since you've been able to play 3 colors in Standard without really giving up much. Like there are decks that have been played in the last year or two that had to play like Evolving Wilds in their main deck. Which is Evolving Wilds, yeah.
Can you get a cream for your doctor for that? It sounds like
yeah, that's not great. I mean, you have to play like a fetch land that fetches a tapped basic land. So now you can't like curve out, and your lands are coming to play tap. Like it's a whole mess.
Yeah, that's clunky.
So it's really been a kind of a problem for a while now. Where playing 3 colors has always been a significant cost, which is why you've seen a lot of 2-color decks, or even in the case of the last year or so, a lot of mono-red decks, really. I mean, we had mono-red, I believe, win 2 different Pro Tours because it just had perfect mana all the time. But what's exciting with Ravnica coming in is that now we have Shocklands. And those Shocklands, you might say, oh, well, it's only 4 lands. Like, why does that matter? It's because it makes your mana base so much more consistent when you have a land that allows you to play either of your colors on turn 1.
So tell us which Shocklands we're getting in this set.
So we're not going to get all of them, which is a little weird. In previous Ravnicas, I think they all came together. But this time around, we're going to get half. So we have Boros, so that means we're going to get Sacred Foundry. We have
red-white, yeah?
Yes, red-white. We have Izzet, which is red-blue, which means we're going to be getting Steam Vents. And then we have Golgari, which is Overgrown Tomb. That's going to be green-black. We have Dimir, which is Watery Grave, which is a blue-black, and then also Temple Garden, which is going to be the Selesnya Guild, which is green-white. So we have half of them. We have 5 of the 10 Shocklands available in the set, which really makes a really big difference when you're building decks. Because one thing that Wizards did in the last year or so is that they've actually seeded, some people call them the check lands or the buddy lands. Those are lands like Hinterland Harbor. Those are lands that say if you control an island or a forest, it'll come into play untapped.
And the Shocklands count as both basic land types.
Exactly. It's very important that the Shocklands actually count as basic land types, which means that all of those check lands will come into play untapped if you have the appropriate Shockland. So it's the Shockland plus check land mana base. It's been a really long time since we've had it in Standard, but when we did several years ago, pretty much all the decks in Standard were 3 colors, or many of them were, because it's so easy to do.
Nice, nice. What do you see as being the 3-color combinations we're most likely to see with these 5 lands?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, because you would think that, like, Jeskai, or just like you used to call it, like, the USA colors, right? Red, white, and blue. You would think that would be one of them because we have the duels for it, but the cards that we've spoiled, they don't really work together well. It seems like Izzet's mostly about spells and kind of like drawing cards, and Boros is really about small creatures, so I'm not exactly sure how those 2 work together. But the one that I think is definitely going to happen, is going to be, I think, one of probably the best decks in Standard, is Sultai, which is green, black, and blue.
And we've got all 3 of those together, right? All 3 lands?
Yeah, we have both of the lands that matter. We have green, black, and we don't have green, blue. We do not have Breeding Pool. Sorry. But we do have Overgrown Tomb, and we do have Watery Grave.
And that's enough?
I think so, because when you fill out the rest of your mana suite with the check lands, in a video that we filmed, I mean, I think we had a deck that had played 25 lands, and it only had like 4 basic lands in it.
Yeah, it really didn't care, did it?
Yeah, it didn't matter much because...
So you've got 20 duels in your standard deck, and they're all pretty much coming in untapped.
Pretty much,
maybe dealing you 2 damage.
Yeah, I mean, maybe you have some hands where you don't have the basic land and you might have a tap land here or there, but I think in the majority of your hands, the majority of games, it's pretty easy to get all 3 of your colors by turn 2, which is not something that we've seen in Standard since probably when we last had fetch lands in Standard.
That's a while back.
Yeah, it's been a long time because you really, really need to have these strong kind of dual lands in order to have all your colors early. You know what I mean? You can't just have like a tap land, like a Savage Lands or something, like a multicolored land that comes into play tap. That doesn't really work if you don't have it on turn 1.
So the Salto deck was a control deck, right?
Yeah, the Sultai deck can take a couple of different forms because we can be largely a blue-black deck, splashing a little bit of green, which is the deck that we filmed a couple weeks back, that mostly just played Assassin's Trophy with the green card. Or the opposite way you can do it is you can actually be like a green-black, mostly Golgari deck that maybe splashes a little blue for like a sideboard card or counter spells or a couple of other powerful gold cards. So I think which way it takes, I'm not sure. We'll see. It'll be interesting. But I definitely think that those 3 colors together, based on the mana that we have in the format, is going to probably be one of the top decks. Just because your mana base is so smooth. And also the guild mechanics, Golgari caring a lot about graveyards, and Dimir having Surveil, which places cards into graveyards. There's just a natural synergy there.
Yeah, so much synergy. Are there any other 3-color combinations you think are waiting in the wings potentially?
I think that the biggest, honestly, the biggest land, I've said it before, but the biggest land I think that we're missing this time around is Stomping Ground. It's just that, like, because, you know, some of the others, like Godless Shrine is like, you know, like white-black. Like, white-black is okay, but green-red, in the history of Magic, looking at aggro decks, looking at mid-range decks, green-red is just really important because red brings the removal, green brings the creatures. Black-white, it's usually like a lot of overlap. You have a lot of small creatures, a lot of removal, but like you don't really have, one color doesn't give the other color something it lacks.
Yeah.
But like red and green just pair so well together because one color has, like cards like Lightning Strike are exactly what you're trying to back up your big creatures with. So not having access to that in this set I think is very awkward. It means that most of the aggro decks are going to tend more towards Boros, just because there's a lot of gold Boros cards like Boros Challenger and Aurelia, and these kind of like gold Boros colored cards that will probably dictate a little bit how the aggro decks are going to be built. Like, do you really want to build a green red deck that doesn't have its dual land and also like doesn't actually have any gold cards in your colors, or do you want to just go with the flow and see, oh, Boros is a guild in this set. I can access all these same exact, you know, powerful monocolored cards like Lightning Strike while picking up these powerful gold cards from Boros that are actually supported from the set.
I can see the appeal. Are there any other effects in Standard, like Search a Library for a Forest and put into play? It was one we had way back when, or something like that?
Not really. You know, it's interesting. There's not a ton of mana fixing. There's like Thaumatic Compass is a card, I guess, which is like an artifact that you can tap to put basics into your hand.
Basics aren't.
Right. Well, that's the thing, is that that card was maybe doing something when you had a lot of basics in your deck. But in these Ravnica mana bases, you don't actually want to play as many basics.
No.
You want to play the shock lands, you want to play the check lands, and then you'll play whatever basics you need to fill out the complement. But I don't think you can rely on mana fixing that says place a basic land into play. It's the same reason that like Farseek is much better than Rampant Growth. Farseek lets you put in, you know, dual lands versus just monocolored lands, you know, basic lands. That basic land fixing is less good in a Ravnica mana base.
That's fair. Any other mechanics, things that care about basic lands, basic land types?
Really, honestly, because right now with a lot of the sets going away, in Standard we pretty much have almost like 2 core sets, because we have M19 and we also have Dominaria, which in itself was sort of a basic set too. So we don't have a lot of cards that really care about that stuff, unfortunately. You know, we have Ixalan, which we probably in one of our videos will talk about my not so happy take on Ixalan. So we have Ixalan, which was a low power level block. That's the thing about that one. And then we had a couple, basically like 2 core sets. So we actually don't have that much amount of fixing outside of what actually comes in the new Ravnica set.
So that's constructed covered out. What mana fixing is there for limited that's going to affect what we're able to do there?
Well, this is where it gets interesting to me, because in limited they have commons, which are guild gates, which are just dual lands that come into play tapped. That kind of an effect of having 2 colors that come into play tapped, in constructed it's rough, and in limited it's completely fine. You know, you can play a deck with 4 or 5 guild gates in it. Yeah, you're not going to be able to curve out with your 6-drop as much as you'd like, but it's perfectly acceptable if you're playing a 3-color like draft deck or sealed deck to have a bunch of gates in it and have fantastic mana. It's worth paying the cost of the tap land sometimes. Also, you have lockets, which are the 3 mana artifacts that tap for either color. Having these cards in the format makes playing 3 color decks in Limited a lot more possible than in most sets. Like, it's a good example would be like an M19 versus Dominaria, where in Dominaria you had several ways to fix mana, and a lot of time you'd play 3 colors. In M19 it was basically impossible. I mean, in Limited you were just playing a core set, not a lot of fixing. You're basically a 2-color set. If you wanted to play Banefire in your deck and you were playing a blue-white deck, you probably just had to put some basic mountains in your deck, which is not great. But what's nice about these Ravnica sets is you have guilds that are aligned to each other, and if you have 2 guilds that share a color, right, like you have Boros, and then you also have Izzet, it's very possible to build a sealed deck that is Jeskai, that combines those 2 into one by just having guild gates and maybe a locket or 2.
The lockets have a secondary ability as well, right?
Yeah, you can draw a card, I think, if you pay 6. So it doesn't come up all that much, but it is a mana sink, right?
Is it sacrifice it, draw a card? Or?
Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
You do have to sacrifice it. So it is expensive and a little hard to do, but it's nice that if you top deck your locket in the late game, it actually can still do something, right?
I mean, you get to the point where you've evened out and you're both top decking, it's that extra little
yeah.
to try and get you going.
The first Ravnica, if you remember, they had the signets. And they decided like the signets were way too good.
They're playing Commander right now, right?
Yeah, they're playing in Commander. They still get played sometimes in Pauper. The signets are just, the problem with the signets is that they actually ramp you a mana. You get to play turn 2 and then turn 3 you have 4 mana.
As well as fixing 2 colors.
And fixing 2 colors, yeah. They've rightly realized those were way too good. So yes, a locket is a pretty far cry from a signet, but in a limited environment, in Ravnica, where you're going to play 3 colors very consistently, especially in Sealed, where you're going to want to play all your good cards, and a lot of the time that's 3 colors, having those lockets is a great thing to have for you.
So there we have it. Shock lands are back. I'm shocked. REA shocked. You'll be putting these into play. You'll be shocked as well, but you'll be happy about it. REA, thank you very much.
Your wallet might be shocked, but you will be happy.
And we'll see you next time on Nights at the Game Table.